today. On behalf of IMCS and ICMICA Pax Romana, I would like to welcome you to this webinar on Pope Francis's latest encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, on fraternity and social friendship. My name is Kevin Ahern. I'm a theologian and an associate professor of religious studies at Manhattan College in New York, and also the president of ICMICA Pax Romana. Fratelli Tutti is the latest document in the canon of modern Catholic social teaching, which started, as many of us know, in 1891 with Pope Leo XIII's encyclical Rerum Novarum. In this latest text, coming in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and the rise of nationalist and populist movements in many parts of the world, Pope Francis speaks to the challenge of looking beyond our borders and the call of the gospel to embrace the role of the Good Samaritan in building an authentic sense of universal siblinghood and justice. As Father James Martin stated, if the message of Laudato Si was everything is connected, then the message of this document, Fratelli Tutti, is everyone is connected. So in many ways, this message is summarized very clearly in paragraph 30 of the text, which says, in today's world, the sense of belonging to a single human family is fading, and the dream of working together for justice and peace seems an outdated utopia. What reigns instead is a cool, comfortable, and globalized indifference, born of a deep disillusionment concealed behind deceptive illusion, thinking that we are all powerful while failing to realize that we are all in the same boat. This fundamental message that we are all in the same boat has been at the heart of the mission of the two branches of Pax Romana, IMCS for university students and ICMICA for lay professionals and intellectuals. We were founded over nearly a century ago in 1921, following the First World War. This is also the title of our seminar today, the notion of we are all in the same boat. So we have a great group of lay leaders lined up with us, and I will briefly introduce the order of the panel of speaking. Following the brief responses, we will open up a time for discussion and questions. And we invite participants to put questions in the chat, in the Q&A feature, or to communicate in the chat box here. I will be monitoring the chat. So we will begin with Miguel Estupiñán, who's a journalist with a master's degree in journalism and theology. He's a member of our movement, of our ICMICA movement in Bogota, Colombia. He will be followed by Anggi Wedo, who is staying up pretty late in Indonesia tonight, a pharmacist and a former leader in the local branch of the IMCS movement in Indonesia called PMKRI. And Dr. Richard Kakeeto, who is a lecturer in the Center for Social Justice Ethics at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, and one of the coordinating team members of our ICMICA movements for East Africa. And finally, Theodora Hawksley, who is a lead for social justice and environmental programming at the London Jesuit Center. She studied theology at Durham University and the University of Edinburgh. So we are excited to have this great panel. We're gonna get the Facebook integration going. There was a little bit of a technical issue with that a second ago, so we will get that moving at the same time. But let me just pull up as Miguel begins. I will have a PowerPoint beginning for him, but then also to go to his text, because he will present his text in Spanish. So if Miguel, if you can just begin.
Thank you, Kevin. I will speak speaking in Spanish, but you will have the translation of my words. This is only a guide, a photograph of Antun Ramos in Bojayá by Jesus Abad, Colorado. And my presentation is about the true path of peace. There are the points that I will be sharing with you, 3 points. So I'm going to read my text. Now, dear Kevin, you can share your screen. Let me just, okay. Thank you. El verdadero camino de la paz. Una expresión de Francisco. La encíclica del Papa Francisco me pone a pensar en los nadies, los ningunos, los ninguneados, agregaría yo, las ninguneadas, sobre quien escribió el uruguayo Eduardo Galeano, al decir que son dueños de nada, muriendo la vida, que no son, aunque sean, que no hablan idiomas, sino dialectos, que no son seres humanos, sino recursos humanos, que no figuran en la historia universal, sino en la crónica roja de la prensa local, los nadies, que cuestan menos que las balas que los matan. Pues bien, con ellos se solidariza Bergoglio en Fratelli Tutti. Los reconoce como víctimas de un orden social injusto, modelado por dogmas como el de la propiedad privada por encima de la dignidad humana, exaltada por el neoliberalismo. Dogmas que respaldan sistemas corruptos que obstaculizan el desarrollo digno. Pero más allá de reconocerlos como víctimas, el Papa Francisco manifiesta su admiración hacia ellos como sujetos políticos, por su capacidad para generar movimientos populares en demanda de tierra, vivienda y trabajo, por su solidaridad, que es una forma de hacer historia, porque combaten las causas estructurales de la pobreza y la desigualdad. Me veo obligado a hablar de Colombia, mi país, al que el Papa le dedica varios apartados en su encíclica, recordando su visita de 2017 y los mensajes que ofreció en Bogotá, Villavicencio y Cartagena. Hace años muchos ninguneados conformaron un movimiento nacional en demanda de la paz, buscando la verdad sobre la historia de un conflicto armado que suma ya más de 150 años. Y muchos de esos ninguneados han sido asesinados en los últimos años porque todavía no se han podido conjurar la guerra a pesar de los acuerdos suscritos en 2016 entre el gobierno del entonces presidente Juan Manuel Santos y la hoy extinta guerrilla de las FARC. Uno de dichos acuerdos, uno de los más importantes, estuvo dirigido a promover procesos para una más equitativa distribución de la tierra. Según Oxfam, Colombia es el país de América Latina con mayor concentración en la tenencia de tierra, en un continente donde los niveles de concentración son de por sí muy altos. En 2018, el 1% de las fincas de mayor tamaño tenían en su poder el 81% de la tierra colombiana. Investigadores sociales como Iván Garzón de la Universidad Católica de La Sabana, aquí en Bogotá, todavía niegan que el conflicto armado tenga su origen en esta situación de injusticia estructural. Según ellos, la guerra es culpa de rebeldes y románticos que se alzaron contra el orden y la convivencia. Otra cosa piensa el sociólogo jesuita Javier Giraldo, quien lleva décadas revelando las relaciones entre violencia estatal e intereses económicos particulares y ha sufrido amenazas y estigmatización por sus posiciones que reconocen que a la violencia guerrillera le antecede un desorden social legitimado políticamente a lo largo de la historia del país por pactos de élites. El jesuita Javier Giraldo ha sido uno de los principales fustigadores y críticos del paramilitarismo, esa forma de violencia que pone la fuerza del Estado al servicio de proyectos privados, de ganaderos, narcotraficantes, empresas agroindustriales o petroleras. Esa forma de violencia se viene agudizando. En el marco de ella se ha practicado la pena de muerte, que en Colombia es ilegal, pero se ha llevado a cabo de diversas formas, por ejemplo, matando a civiles y presentándolos como guerrilleros caídos en combate, una práctica que el Papa Francisco condena en el número 267 de su encíclica. Pues bien, otro de los acuerdos de paz exigía el desmantelamiento del paramilitarismo, pero es poco lo que se ha hecho desde el 2016 hasta hoy para que eso se concrete. El fenómeno paramilitar es inseparable de otra pandemia que vivimos en mi país, Los asesinatos de defensores de derechos fueron los pactos de paz. Desde la firma del acuerdo de paz hasta hoy han sido asesinados más de 971 líderes sociales, según cifras de Indepaz. En el mismo periodo han matado a más de 220 exintegrantes de las FARC, todo en medio de la mayor impunidad. Este es el terreno en el que caen las palabras de Fratelli Tutti como semillas. La sociedad colombiana se encuentra notoriamente dividida. Hay liderazgos políticos que en lugar de promover la reconciliación o la superación de la guerra, insisten en el uso de la violencia legitimada supuestamente por el Estado. Hace unas pocas semanas vimos en vivo y en directo cómo en la capital del país, Bogotá, hombres de la policía asesinaron a varias personas que protestaban por el asesinato también a manos de policías de Javier Ordóñez, detenido en la madrugada del 9 de septiembre. Y hay quien le aplicaron descargas eléctricas a estos policías antes de que muriera como consecuencia de los maltratos recibidos. Los policías le aplicaron descargas eléctricas a Javier Ordóñez mientras estaba detenido y luego él murió como consecuencia de esos y otros maltratos recibidos, insisto. Ciertamente, la violencia ejercida desde las estructuras y el poder del Estado no está en el mismo nivel de la violencia de grupos particulares, tal y como dice Bergoglio en el número 253 de su encíclica. Vivimos en la era del shock, afirma Naomi Klein. Una lectura teológica proveniente de los ninguneados ve al crucificado en toda víctima del orden injusto imperante. La imagen del Cristo roto de Bojayá que les mostré, a quien el Papa Francisco le rezó en Villavicencio durante su viaje a Colombia, refiere a la ruptura del alma de mi país por cuenta de décadas de conflicto armado. Hay víctimas de todos los lados. Yo estoy de acuerdo con Bergoglio. No se puede pretender que solo se recuerden los sufrimientos injustos de una sola de las partes, pero una de esas partes que equivale a la masa de ciudadanas y ciudadanos que desde la periferia más han sufrido la guerra, dijeron sí a lo acordado en La Habana en favor de la paz. Pacta sunt servanda. Los pactos deben ser cumplidos, aunque el actual gobierno y el partido político del presidente Iván Duque, regentado por Álvaro Uribe, sigan diciendo que no. Thank you.
Gracias, Miguel. From the situation of post-civil conflict reconciliation in Colombia to now we move to Indonesia.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Once again, I'm Anggi from Indonesia. I'm a pharmacist. I like to commit myself to help people, especially to gather young people and to share our dream for better living. I participate in education children, especially for poor children. So this time I would like to share with you my reflection on this encyclical of Pope Francis, Fratelli Tutti, and I will focus on chapter 6, which is about dialogue and friendship in society. And Pope wrote that if we want to encounter and help one another, we have to dialogue. The encyclical is an attempt to purpose an inclusive global economy, and COVID-19 provides such an opportunity, but we are likely to miss the opportunity because we are living in the complex world. In this situation, I would like to share with you an experience that I encountered with one of the patients in pharmacy store. So 2 weeks ago, when I was in the medical store, one patient came to ask for medicine for his stomach ache. I was giving some suggestion to open the conversation. By chance, I came to know it was not what he needed. He was on treatment for depression, obviously using some medicine only taken by those who are in depression. And I realized he's one of the many people who are suffering so much because of this pandemic situation. He has his own family to take care for, and yet he has no job and nobody support him. To overcome this situation, instead he was often bullied by his neighborhood. And in my almost 8 year of learning experience on how to take appropriate action together as young people, often happen that although I have known the real things that happen in society, still unclear for me about the way to initiate it on action that needed and the way how to achieve the goal. And going back to the encyclical on number 166, Pope wrote, everything then depends on our ability to see the needs for a change of heart, attitude, and lifestyle. This touched me and made me realize that I need to connect with the issues and to have an empathy on them, and then to take action. Having the empathy will create the bond between the issues and me. And I will put most focus on it and take action step by step. And the tools to address well the issues can be done with the dialogue. In the encyclical, Pope Francis wrote on dialogue and friendship in the society that if we want to encounter and have one another, we have to do the dialogue. We are living in the situation where the urgent need is to take action and being loyal good friend facing the issues. And nowadays we are living in the pluralistic society, as it mentioned in number 212. Dialogue is the best way to realize what ought always to be affirmed and respected. By dialogue, we will bear to get the center of the issues, and so the dignity of other is to be respected. Every person has the same inviolable dignity. Absolutely, while we address the issue, we need to remember all human beings have the inviolable dignity and must be handled with respect by dialogue. So in the context of Indonesia, we are living in the pluralistic society where many aspects, including politics, culture, social, economy, history, play a big role. And Indonesia has diverse cultures, religion, tribe, languages, which make us a beautiful country, and especially for young people and women. And the first thing we can start from is our self-acceptance, our personal history, our personality, our gender, our culture, our religion, and our tribe. So I was studying in Surabaya, and I have friends from other places with different background, and we share dreams, value, also take action together for a change. We are from different field of study, gathered together, discuss what we can do together. So we had a program to educate the poor children outside the city. Also, in practicing dialogue, we must understand the other, share our value and principle. In any city, there will be many of people from other places, and we need to understand them in the way they speak, in the way they dress, the way they think, in order to achieve a better living in our community. And here in Indonesia, still there is a big gap in respecting the value of quality and dignity of women. And we can notice this from their role in society and their participation in our culture. Like here, I observe many of families prefer to give more opportunities to boys than to the girls. And the boys are the one who will go for the higher education more than the girls. And we can apply dialogue as mean in order to give equal opportunities to boys and girls. And maybe I can add what we can do as a student. All I can say for young student and for students and young people, we need to educate to prepare ourselves, especially in dialogue, so that we can work together in order to address the issue and to practice dialogue among our friends, family, school, and society. And so, as a young people, I appreciate the insight of this encyclical that has been given to us, and the motivation that enriches our horizon, perspective, practical skill of loving one another, even in the politics, to achieve our noble goals. Thank you.
Good, thank you so much. And so we moved from Colombia to Indonesia to now we moved to East Africa, to Kenya.
Thank you very much, Kevin. This is Augustine Richard Kakeeto. Actually, right now I'm in Kampala, even though I'm based in Nairobi. And I will share my experiences from the perspective of being a member of the Ordo Franciscanum Secularis, the secular Franciscan order. Also, as someone who has had the opportunity to be both in the academic environment, but also in the field of action, advocacy, and as an associate to the convening entity for the Eastern African members of ICMICA. I'll start with the title of the encyclical and its launch. Now, Fratelli Tutti is chosen from the admonitions of St. Francis of Assisi, and it happens to have been signed on the tomb of the saint on the 3rd of October 2020. And you know that Franciscans are in the habit of celebrating the Transitus in commemoration of the death of the saint on that very day. And then the following day, 4th October, they would celebrate the solemnity. Now, from the part of the world where I come from, Franciscans are a huge family, spiritual family, because in Kenya alone, we have up to 40 religious institutes, 26 in Tanzania, and 12 in Uganda. Now, by the Pope constantly choosing Franciscan themes, I think he's challenging this team of believers that is quite perverse in the church to really be challenged to be what they are called to be, and in the process witness to others. Then there is this specific encyclical, Fratelli Tutti. We know that the admonitions from which the name is chosen were not written in one go. Some actually say that Francis composed these individual admonitions as instructions to his brothers as they gathered at community meetings or meals regularly. Others actually say that these admonitions were placed historically between the time he wrote a letter to the chapter of the friars and when he wrote his testament before his death, or at least before his testament was made. Now, you also realize that this encyclical, as the Pope himself says, has not been written in one go. Actually, he says that issues of human fraternity and social friendship have always been a concern of mine. In recent years, actually, I have spoken of them repeatedly in different settings. And that in this encyclical, I have sought to bring together many of those statements and to situate them in a broader context of reflection. Now, when you follow Pope Francis from the 2013 downwards, especially the content of the messages on the World Day of Peace, you would figure out that a lot of these messages he captures in here have been contained now into what we would say authoritative teaching. The other issue I want to raise relates to the question of interfaith relations. Now, the Pope cites his visit to the Imam, the Grand Imam in the Middle East last year in commemoration of the Damietta experience that had taken place with Saint Francis himself. Now, we in the church are not all agreed, even though there is a solid teaching on Nostra Aetate. We have some Christians who doubt the call to live with Muslims without converting them, for example. We have a number of Christians who are largely driven by, look here, they're either with us or against us. And actually the visit to the Imam and the document that came there from rose some sort of debate in our area here because, we have these challenges of terrorism that is simplistically connected to the Muslim community and the tendency for Christians to think that they are being persecuted. Our friends in Tanzania also have intentionally tried to keep an interreligious dialogue set up. So in situations where people are in some sort of tension or polarized situations, Christians may not be thoroughly agreed on the desire and need to witness together, as people from various religions to work together by way of dialogue, of action and witness. So this teaching that the Pope now pronounces more authoritatively adds value to Nostra Aetate as lived in our day and time. We then have the question of bridging the ideological divide. Now, when the Pope published Laudato Si, the environmentalists and ecological justice people celebrated, and for some reason, our usual conservatives or pro-lifers thought they had been left out. But on a proper reading of Laudato Si, you would realize, at least I think paragraph 50, where the Pope insisted that, look here, you cannot blame population increase for the problems of the environment. You would be missing the point. Now, in Fratelli Tutti, the beauty about it is that both the conservatives and liberals can find comfort in this document. In condemning the throwaway culture, he has been able to protect the unborn child as we would protect the elderly. In essence, we have in the Catholic Church today people who are struggling because of this ideological divide. You are either liberal or conservative. I personally have a challenge. I have a background in social justice work. I've been pushing human rights work, writing reports to the UPR and treaty bodies. But the people I work with in that field of human rights get surprised when they find that I'm very pro-life and pro-family, partly because the social justice movement looks at the pro-life and pro-family wing as very conservative. Now, there are Christians who are midway. They can be both fully social justice in mindset and also fully pro-life and pro-family. What is playing out on the political scene in the United States at this point in time is speaking volumes across the globe. And I'm thankful that with Fratelli Tutti, the openness to inclusion and dialogue and the global friendship we are talking about, and the fact that when we are pushing an agenda or an ideology, we ought to be cautious that we are not imposing values onto others and allowing people to grow and protect their values within their contexts. Finally, the question of religious freedom and religious liberty. We are aware that probably on the 20th, the special rapporteur on religious freedom and belief is going to be tabling a report which might lead to a resolution by the Human Rights Council of the United Nations. Now, that report has raised jitters amongst believers, amongst the faith sector. It is being very critical about some moral teachings, which it accuses as being discriminatory. If we are to ride on the spirit of Fratelli Tutti, it might be necessary that whoever is pushing the sexual and reproductive health and rights agenda within the United Nations system, if they are people of goodwill or followers of the Catholic teaching, they might have to reconsider how discriminatory it is going to be for faith leaders to be gagged, so to say, in holding certain moral teachings that they have been handed on to pass on. So I'll end it there for now, Kevin. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Richard. Some interesting perspectives there. A lot to unpack in our conversations in a minute. So from Kampala, we move up to London.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It's very good to be with you all. I'd like to begin by talking about the title of the encyclical. And the first thing to say is that I can see why Francis has chosen to use that word fratelli. The use of that word and the choice of the word fraternity throughout the document, I think is quite significant. I'm a Catholic social teaching geek, so I know the development of the concept of solidarity. And different documents have used different words. So John the 23rd uses interdependence and solidarity. Sometimes he says Christian brotherhood. Paul VI uses civilization of love. John Paul II uses solidarity, and it's in his pontificate that the concept develops most fully. So interdependence for him is just the fact that we are all connected together. And solidarity is the moral imperative that arises from that fact. So we have to transform our independence into solidarity. But here with Francis, we have a steer away from solidarity, perhaps with its industrialized, unionized feel, towards the language of fraternity again. So in the same way that Laudato Si wanted us to recover the language of love and wonder and beauty in relation to creation, Fratelli Tutti wants us to recover the language of fraternity, mutual belonging, and compassion. I think that's really important. And I think he's read the shift in the signs of the times rightly here. So the kind of language that we need now in our situation is different. However, in my context especially, the title is a bit of a problem. And in a sense, it's not so much about the title itself and whether the Italian Fratelli includes women because it's a plural. And it's not necessarily about the fact it's a quotation from St. Francis. It's about what it means to be included. So when women began to object to the title, the response from the Vatican was, oh, it means women too. And so what we have is an encyclical called Brothers All, which quotes absolutely no women, and women are again being told, no, you're included. I found this frustrating because in other ways, the document is very good at insisting that the meaning of inclusion and equality and development need to be defined with reference to the self-understanding and the agency of the people who seek them, and not only the people who control them. So countries need to define and shape for themselves what development means, rather than have it imposed from the outside, and so on. And the document even criticizes empty equality language as abstract proclamations. But it does seem blind to the ways that Catholic social teaching and magisterial teaching more widely continues to exclude women's voices and self-understanding and agency while telling them that they are included. And the document itself has so much to say about language and dialogue and the way we address each other and how that matters for how we relate to one another. And it does matter. It matters particularly in my context. I mean, this is a fabulous document. There's so much in here that's really, really good. But it's very hard in my context, which is quite secular already and secularizing, especially among the younger generations with whom I work. It's very hard for the church to get a hearing because of the way that it treats women and because of its teaching on people who identify as LGBT. And so for a document to launch amid this difficulty and this disagreement over the inclusiveness of the title really undermines the ability of the document to speak more widely than the church, who will already listen because it's the Pope. All that said, it's not a social teaching encyclical that just speaks over the heads of the laity. In the past, I think Catholic social teaching has often had a sort of macro and micro focus. So it makes very general recommendations addressed to politicians, heads of government, and so on. And it calls for very large scale changes without really saying much about how we get there. And then on a very micro level, it calls for individual conversion, the conversion of our hearts. But it doesn't really have much to say often about the middle level, so the level of cultures and movements that help to build the large-scale change, but also that enable and provoke that individual conversion. Fratelli Tutti is much better at that middle level. So there's a very clear sense of needing to respond at a concrete social level, not to stay in our little bubbles of fraternity. So there's a clear sense that its values like fraternity, equality, freedom need to be supported by culture, by education, by civil institutions, and not just kind of proclaimed from on high or established in law. I think that's hugely, hugely important. In the face of enormous global problems, the encyclical's understanding of love isn't kind of small and cellular and withdrawn. Love is political, love organizes, love struggles. I was really glad to hear Miguel's remarks. I could talk all day, I won't, about the peace building section of the encyclical. Just to note here that the encyclical again is addressed far more to lay people than Catholic social teaching on peace has been to date. So it tends to focus very much on that elite level of political decision-making and negotiations. But again, here we have a sense of needing to root a culture of encounter and sustainable peace building at a local level. I think that whole section is very, very exciting. But I'll leave my remarks there. So thank you, Kevin.
Excellent. Thank you so much for all of you. Just as a technical note, the integration with Facebook doesn't seem to be working for this webinar today, but we will have the video of this put onto Facebook as soon as we're done. But there are a few questions that I've put into the chat and elsewhere, and we'll get to those in a second. So, but I want to throw out a question to the panelists. So Catholic social teaching has for many, many years been called the best kept secret of the church. I think, you know, after, I don't know, the book that coined that might have been 20 years ago at this point. So a lot of us have been working very hard to keep that secret, to get that secret out there. So what do you think is the strategy here in your context, in the four contexts that you come from, to share this document? How can we share the insights of this very long document? I'm not entirely sure how many lay Christians are going to read the whole thing, and I'm not entirely sure how many pastors or seminarians might read the whole thing. But how do we share it? So let's think about strategy for a minute. How do we share it in your context?
Bueno, insisto, voy a hablar en español en honor a la diversidad. Ya posteriormente el video admite que haya traducciones. A mí me ha llamado mucho la atención el silencio que ha habido dentro del episcopado colombiano sobre la encíclica. He visto solo unas cuantas reacciones por parte, por ejemplo, del arzobispo de Cali, un verdadero artesano de la paz, como lo ha reconocido incluso el nuncio apostólico, su crítico en algunos puntos, y diría yo Luis Manuel Alí, obispo auxiliar de Bogotá, quien hace parte de los asesores del Papa en temas de defensa de la niñez. Y ese silencio pues me llama mucho la atención. No ha habido una estrategia comunicativa por parte de las oficinas de prensa muy poderosas, por cierto, aquí en Colombia, por ejemplo, en Bogotá, para tratar los temas nucleares que en el caso colombiano pues comprometen el asunto de la construcción de la paz. Yo creo que, bueno, hay un contexto donde ha empezado a tener una gran recepción y es en el contexto del diálogo político. Varios congresistas colombianos, defensores de derechos humanos como Iván Cepeda, están leyéndola, la están estudiando y a diario comparten ideas sobre la encíclica. Si bien no necesariamente son católicos, yo diría pues todo lo contrario, pero se encuentran desde la defensa de los derechos humanos con activistas cristianos como Javier Giraldo. Aquí cumplen un papel muy importante los centros de estudio, los centros de investigación social que tiene, por ejemplo, la Iglesia Católica en Colombia. El Observatorio de Realidades Sociales de Cali también ha estado divulgándola, ha estado estudiándola. Y hay un brazo muy fuerte que es el de los jesuitas en Colombia, que tienen una misión por cumplir, ¿no? Ya algunos jesuitas también llaman la atención sobre el silencio que ha habido en amplios sectores del catolicismo colombiano sobre la encíclica. Yo espero entonces que los jesuitas hagan una gran recepción como en su momento les mereció Laudato Si. Más allá del ámbito teológico. En Bogotá, por ejemplo, en la Universidad Javeriana, la recepción de Laudato Si fue interdisciplinar. Y bueno, esta encíclica me parece que tiene muchos elementos para ser trabajados.
Elizabeth Mueller, can you summarize? Our Vice President for Latin America.
Yes, the most important thing he taught to us is he is astonished of the silence of the bishops in Colombia regarding the encyclical. And there is, he tells us, two bishops, one archbishop from Cali and an auxiliary bishop, I think from Bogota, who have been talking about. The others and the communication system, which is very strong from the church in Colombia, has not even mentioned about it, which is worrying. Mostly regarding the construction of peace. That is a main issue in the country. There are some people from other areas, not really the church, even people that are not Catholic, who are trying to read and discuss about, like people from political media, senators and so on. He also mentions research centers that are studying mostly Catholic research centers, and the Jesuits in Colombia, who are very strong and have also noted the silence from the bishops. And he counts on the Jesuits in Colombia to make a better reception and more wider reception of the document, like have been done with the Laudato Si, with an not only on theological issues, but more wider attention, like in the University Javeriana from the Jesuits in Bogota, have been done with the Laudato Si, a very big reception with people from all the areas of knowledge. So he expects from them also something like this. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Gigi. Thank you, Elizabeth. Others on the strategy, or perhaps even commenting on Miguel's point of how is there silence from your church leaders on this document in the last few days? Richard first, and then Theodora.
Okay, yeah. First and foremost, the silence, I would be slow to talk of silence if the letter, the encyclical came out on the 3rd, and today is 7th. The 3rd was a Saturday. Our bishops were going to be preaching, or priests were going to be preaching on Sunday, so it would be very preemptive to judge silence at this point in time. But about strategy, first and foremost, we must appreciate the manner in which Pope Francis writes. He writes in a manner that even a grade 12 student would understand what he is writing about. You would read Laudato Si, you would see Fratelli Tutti. The writing is intelligible. I'm telling you, when I was reading things like Evangelium Vitae or Caritas in Veritate, some of this stuff was a little bit heavy. You would have to read a paragraph twice to be able to explain it to another. So strategically, the method of writing is really very intelligible and soft for the lay person. Secondly, the benefit of technology and the speed at which information is traveling is impressive at this point in time. I mean, on the 3rd, the document was signed. I was already on the internet looking for it. I didn't get it that very day, but by midday on Sunday, I had the document. And on our platform here, the Catholic professionals, both in Kenya and the African continent, people are already chewing over it and discussing a few components therefrom. So at the level of an enlightened middle class within the church that has access to gadgets that can pull down the document, people are going to be able to read it. I want to look forward to our team leadership here on the ground to organize a few more sessions like this. By the way, Kevin, thank you for making this happen, because this is the starting point for several other sessions that would happen in the various places. One thing I've discovered in the past, in the last few years, a number of seminaries and theological institutes have made the church social teaching a standalone course unit, which means that by a publication of an encyclical such as this, there is a course outline that is going to improve. Personally, I teach Franciscan commitment to peace, and I've been in the habit of asking my students to read extracts of the papal encyclicals or messages on the World Day of Peace to be able to draw the Franciscan messages as they are pronounced today. So already we have a framework in which these messages can be disseminated. What I'm not sure about, though, is how they will get to the rural woman, the rural man, the peasant farmer. That one is what we need to think through thoroughly. Thank you.
Great. And Richard, you're speaking a bit to what Theodora said earlier, which I thought I heard was the power of lay movements and lay groups in this middle range space in the church. So Theodora, can you follow up? You were going to say.
Thanks. Yeah. I think there are two things to do really in terms of strategy. One is something that we're already good at. So we have plenty of church communications and organizations and NGOs that are really well connected with schools and parishes and will produce loads of attractive resources that communicate the message of this document, which is incredibly quotable, as Richard said. I think the other part of the strategy, one of the things I noticed on social media was that a lot of people were saying, wow, he's really talking about America in that bit, or wow, he's really talking about this country in another bit. And in a sense, I guess like a very good social encyclical, it's like one of those portraits where the eyes follow you around the room wherever you are. So every nation feels a little bit seen. And that makes me think that the other part of the strategy is not just communicating what the encyclical says in terms of the message of it, but doing the work of receiving the encyclical, doing the work of saying, what does it mean to us in our context? What practically is it asking us to do in our context? And that's perhaps more difficult. I think we do have the ability to do that, but that's what I really want to see.
Great. And Anggi,
Kevin,
yeah.
Kevin, I wanted to point out something. You see, Laudato Si generated an entire movement. You know, the global GCCM, Global Catholic Movement, Laudato Si generation, probably, but Fratelli Tutti might excite some action amongst people who've been already acting in the area of interreligious dialogue or migration. There might be some action there. I want to be hopeful.
Great. I want to give Anggi a sense, and then we'll get to some of the questions that have appeared in the chat. So Anggi, how does this apply? How would you imagine this sharing with people in your context? Students, young professionals?
Yeah, so all I can say for the strategic, we need a good communication, and so we should have the open dialogue. It starts from our little group. It starts from ourselves to our close community, to our family, and then so we can sharpen the encyclical, and so we can have also connect to social media, because it's something that really close to the youth nowadays, and so on. I think that's the strategy. So we can open the good communication and start doing the dialogue to make this encyclical get into the youth.
Great. One of the questions, thank you so much. One of the questions that emerged in the chat, but not in the question box, was from Michael Schreiner from St. Louis. So he asked, are there large numbers of vocal critics of Pope Francis in your countries? So I think he's referring to some vocal critics of Pope Francis that are in the United States, especially in social media. Are there bishops and priests who preach or write something publicly undercutting his message, as some do in the United States? So if I read his question correctly. So anyone want to maybe respond? Can you imagine resistance to this document?
Bueno, yo tengo una crítica a la visión que el Papa tiene de la ideología. Me parece que es una visión peyorativa de las ideologías, y de eso han sabido aprovecharse en Colombia quienes condenan desde escenarios políticos la supuesta, entre comillas, ideología de género. Estos grupos que les digo que favorecieron el no a los acuerdos de paz. Y yo creo que estos sectores, en ciertas tesis del Papa, en la encíclica, en su crítica a la ideología, van a seguir teniendo argumentos de autoridad para seguir marginando posiciones políticas que no coinciden con las posiciones políticas más conservadoras de un catolicismo que aún hoy en Colombia tiene muy estrechas relaciones con el poder político. Y son sectores políticos colombianos en relación con sectores políticos de Estados Unidos y con este catolicismo que apoya, por ejemplo, las políticas de Donald Trump. Hay relaciones entre el catolicismo de Estados Unidos conservador y el catolicismo conservador de Colombia, que ha estado en contra del proceso de paz y que critica la ideología de género, tanto como el Papa lo hace.
Elizabeth?
Yes, Miguel says that he foresees that he has a criticism to the vision of the Pope in the encyclica about ideology. In several points he treats ideology as a pejorative term, and this can lead to be used by several groups that are against the current status quo of conservative Catholics in power, that even like criticizing the gender ideology, because it's not acceptable to use the word ideology for everything. And Miguel thinks that it's not a good thing that in the encyclica it appears like every time as a bad thing, the ideology. So he thinks that this will stronger the conservative Catholics in Colombia that are supported and support conservative Catholics in US.
Particularly in gender topics. That's the point between the politics and the gender movements here in Colombia, and the conservative Catholicism is against a kind of peace that exists have to be with the sexuality too. That's a problem. It's a nuclear problem. The sexuality is a problem to the peace building.
Very interesting. Yeah. Others responses to that? Richard. Yeah.
Yeah. In our region, the bishops' conferences, I think, see themselves as implementers of what has come from Rome. And if they don't, I mean, it could be a bishop or two or another who may not necessarily agree, they will not be vocal about it. Usually what happens that a document would suffer the injury of Justitia in Mundo. I don't know if you remember that document, which never got cited at all, never got translated for a very long time. And it was just discovered by people who were deeply interested in putting the church teaching in that direction out there. So what would happen is that probably they would just let it lie and not popularize it. That is the worst that could happen. But given the fact that the topics that are raised in Fratelli Tutti are practical issues that the church in this region is dealing with, what people will do is to choose what to apply, and if they're critical of other components, they would let those elements pass. And it will be the task of those who are deeply devoted to promoting it to popularize the document. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Any others?
Yeah, thank you. Although obviously in England we are English-speaking Catholicism, the situation here is a bit different from the United States. So Catholicism in the United States is very, very polarized. And while I think it's true to say that English Catholicism has become more polarized in recent years, partly as a result of looking to the United States, we are not yet in that place. I think also because our political parties do not kind of line up with different areas of the Catholic vote, I suppose. They don't split the Catholic vote in the same way. All of which means, I think, that the document challenges us in different ways. I think particularly in its, in what it has to say about migrants. And I think it will require courage from our bishops really to speak out about this. There is anti-migrant feeling. As you know, we are negotiating Brexit, the withdrawal from the European Union. And so amid that, to challenge the bishops to communicate to Catholics and to the government what it is that Catholic social teaching has to say on that issue. And that I think will be polarizing.
On that note, to build off of a question that was just put in the chat from Noonan Bang, who's from the Philippines, from Manila, how can dialogue get through growing populist leaders all over the world? So a big critique of the text is the growth of populism, the growth of thick borders, of xenophobic nationalisms, but then also he tries to reframe those notions of what nationalism should be or what populism should be in light of the Good Samaritan, but also in the light of dialogue. So how do we approach dialogue if people are so set in their ways that they don't want to listen? I don't know if Anggi, if you have any thoughts on that, or in the Indonesian context, or.
Okay, so The core purpose of dialogue is that, like, we need to hold ourselves, and we have to do dialogue heart to heart. We have to speak heart to heart. So if it's so difficult, so it's the main core of the problem. So we need to do it heart to heart, and have the dialogue as its value of patience and perseverance. So we have to understand the spirit of dialogue, which is we need to get close to each other, speak heart to heart, and then we can come out with the solution.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Richard, you talked about dialogue. Do you have any? I mean, how do you dialogue with the ideological, or in the side where people are so entrenched in their ways?
Yeah, it is an interesting bit, and the way it manifests in our region is quite different. I don't know, you've heard of President John Pombe Magufuli of Tanzania, that has chosen to take some very populist positions, and for some reason, the bulk of the nation has lined up behind him. Even though human rights people remain critical of it, and a number of leaders are critical of his approach, I really don't have an answer of how dialogue could tackle populist leaders unless we talk of evangelization through their pastors. I mean, it would have to be religious leaders to whom populist leaders owe some allegiance, to break through to them and soften their position on the exclusive policies that they tend to take. That's the best I can say for now.
I want to just touch on two of the more questions, and then we'll slowly wrap up. But there's more to do on this. One of the questions, sort of in some ways related to this, comes from Chris Knowles, and Chris says, if there is so much if there's much more in Fratelli Tutti for lay people, and maybe in some ways citizens, consumers, these other sorts of roles that lay people play compared to previous documents, are we more hopeful that it will be easier to engage lay people in the wider church? Any ideas how we might start this when, because of COVID-19, so many of our local church communities don't presently exist as they did? A similar sort of question emerges from Bernard Sabella, who's a Christian leader in Palestine and a professor and civil society leader there. And Dr. Sabella says, in light of COVID-19, how would Catholic social teaching, inclusive of Fratelli Tutti and other encyclicals, play a role in this time of pandemic? Or is this a far-fetched question? So perhaps as sort of a wrap-up question, maybe we can all reflect on the specific context that we are in different places in our world. How does this get received in light of COVID-19? And how, because the traditional ways are obviously we're doing this, so traditional ways are different. What impact is this going to have in mobilizing lay people in light of COVID-19?
Can I take all three previous questions together? So the populism question.
Our thoughts, yeah.
Yeah. I'm always interested, because I think my answer to the how do you get populist leaders to listen question fills me with despair. But the good news is we don't have to start at that level. And I think one of the strengths of the church in strategic peace building and in building solidarity is that on a local level, it cuts across some of the other kind of siloed ways of thinking and belonging that we have online, say. So in this country, at least, particularly in London, which is so mixed, you might have people who hold very, very strongly different political views, but who actually share the same pew at Mass, or they are from quite different ends of the social spectrum, but they also share a local community. Now, online, we often go to our little camps, don't we, of the people who agree with us and where we feel reflected. So I think churches, both in person and online, gathering people during this pandemic, have a role in building different kinds of networks of solidarity. different kinds of networks of dialogue. I think we have seen an outpouring of solidarity in this pandemic. And I think one of the things the church has to do is think really strategically about how do we build on that to renew the networks of solidarity going forwards? How do we make the most of this opportunity?
Bueno, yo quiero referirme a quién está dirigida la encíclica. Si el Papa habla de no excluir a las mujeres, espero que también esté hablando para el Estado Vaticano, para la Curia Vaticana. Eso por una parte. Y estoy de acuerdo que las soluciones a la pandemia deben nacer de reconocer la dignidad y el carácter sagrado de la movilización social desde abajo y los procesos que tienen lugar desde abajo. Repito el primer punto. ¿A quién está dirigido el documento? ¿A los consumidores? Pues el clero también es consumidor, la jerarquía también es consumidora, y yo espero que si el Papa está hablando en contra de la exclusión de las mujeres en algunos pequeños apartados, espero que también se esté dirigiendo al Estado Vaticano y al catolicismo, porque no puede pretender darle lecciones morales al mundo sobre derechos de las mujeres si en el catolicismo no se reconocen esos mismos derechos. Elizabeth, please.
Miguel says that he would look more on to whom it's the direction of is made this encyclical. If it's to all all people, like Theodora said, the consumers, the bishops and the Vatican and the church people, they are also consumers. So if he's talking that he want to go against the exclusion of everybody, even the women, that is in certain paragraphs of the encyclica, it must be also said to the Vatican and to the Church to take the same position. So to avoid exclusion also from the Church to women and to everybody. So he would like to see also that the encyclica is taken for everybody, also for the Vatican and for the Church itself.
Un último punto sobre también laicado y política. En el sínodo de 1971 sobre el sacerdocio y la acción política se hablaba de que el clero no debería comprometerse en procesos partidistas. Entonces se supone que a casi 50 años la política es un asunto del laicado, supuestamente, pero vemos en países como Colombia, donde el poder político del catolicismo, de la jerarquía, de los obispos, protegiendo a algunos partidos políticos y a sus líderes, todavía existe. Entonces, el Papa aquí no le está hablando solo, espero yo, a los laicos en quienes están los procesos políticos. Espero que también le está hablando a los obispos comprometidos muy negativamente en intervenciones partidistas a favor de los poderosos y de los grupos económicos. That's all. Thank you.
He said that about lay people and politics. There was a synod, I don't know exactly which one he said. That, 1971, that said that the politics, the the clergy should not be on specific parties, political parties, and do not go into the political issues directly. So he would like to see that this encyclica is not only for lay people, but also to the church and the many bishops and the structure of the church that are supporting some sides of the state or the or political structures, and not only for the lay people that are working in doing politics, but also the church itself that are many times supporting the mostly the conservative statues.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Miguel. Others sort of responding to this question of how we, specifically in this context of COVID, right? How do we receive an encyclical in COVID?
I'd like to say that the relevance of the encyclical to the situation in which we are opens the doors for it. People have lost jobs, people have learned new methods of living. I'll give an experience. There are classes of mine that were cut into half because of COVID. We never stopped learning. We just shifted from face-to-face classes to online. But there are inequalities that COVID has exposed, that there are certain students who, once they cannot be at the school, they are not in school. Why? They cannot have the tablets, they don't have the laptops. So the message of solidarity and including and exclusion of the poor that we are living in today, I think grants this encyclical momentum already. Anyone who cares to respond to the in-COVID situation and the post-COVID situation has a lot of lessons to draw from this encyclical. So I think it is possible to actually receive this encyclical and run with it. Everyone, as our colleague indicated, has been spoken to in one way or another, unless you're not involved in social action in the church. But if you are, you've been spoken to in one way or another by the encyclical. Ciao.
Thank you. And Anggi, in your context, even as a pharmacist dealing with COVID in Indonesia, how does this document and its message of dialogue and fraternity, do you think it can be listened to? Do you think Christians in Indonesia and others would listen to this text?
Okay, thank you. So pharmacists globally are also working to providing service amidst the pandemic, and such as see the patient, reducing the patient burden. Also, we go for home care. So there is a chance for us to get close with the patient, and also we can open the dialogue, open the conversation, and also to see what the patient needed, or we can work together to solve the problem there. So I think that's what pharmacy really can do there in this pandemic situations. Also, we still increase how to say that we can ask the patient to follow the protocol, so we can stop the spread of the COVID.
Thank you. So I think obviously one of the challenges that Pope Francis draws the attention for Christians in this document too, is to try to embody the model of the Good Samaritan. And certainly our friends in the healthcare industry, but so many others in service industries are doing this professionally, and we have often at great risk. So I think we have a tremendous debt of gratitude to people in the health industry that we express here. So we're about time, and I know there's a lot to discuss on this whole question of Fratelli Tutti. There's a lot to unpack here. As a way of closing, perhaps we can turn to the words of Pope Francis himself at the end of the document. He offers two prayers. So we can look at one of his prayers here that I put into the chat. As we close with the prayer, please join me to thank our panelists here. As Pax Romana, we are committed to mobilizing lay people, both university students and professionals, to try to respond to these crises that are facing our world and to build a more just world that recognizes that we are all in the same boat. So let us look at this prayer and reflect on this, and then we will close up. Lord, creator of our human family, you created all human beings in equal dignity. Pour forth into our hearts a fraternal spirit and inspire us a dream of renewed encounter, dialogue, justice, and peace. Move us to create healthier societies and a more dignified world, a world without hunger, poverty, violence, and war. May our hearts be open to all peoples and nations on earth. May we recognize the goodness and beauty that you have sown in each of us, and thus forge bonds of unity and common projects and shared dreams. Amen. Thank you all for sharing your dreams here and for taking the time to be with us, and let us work together for a more just and fraternal and sororital world. So thank you, and thank you to Elizabeth for translating, and for all the panelists and for others for joining. Very much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank you.
everybody.